Balandigo Gundulumbale. Balandigo Gundulumbale. Balandigo Gundulumbale. Yang indai yan go gundai yan go. Balandigo Gundulumbale. Balandigo Gundulumbale. Bulkairi Marumba Mianjanu, Bulkairi Marumba Karulpanu. That is welcome to Brisbane in the language of the Turrbal people, and also welcome to this specific area of Brisbane, Karilpa, the place of the water, marsupial water rat, which is most of the southern side of the Brisbane River. My name is Maroochy Barambah, which means the black swan, from those people who sing up the wind. The painting on my face represents the black swan, and the painting on my cloak represents the black swan. My family are descended from Dakiyaka. That name was anglicised to the Duke of York back in the 1830s. Dakiyaka was documented as being the chief of the Brisbane tribe by Foster Faines, the commandant of the then penal settlement of Moreton Bay back in the 1830s. He was a chief of the Brisbane tribe, not the South Brisbane tribe, not the North Brisbane tribe, but the Brisbane tribe, the Turrbal people. The Turrbal people are made up of 5 different clan groups. You had the Dakiyaka, or the Duke of York clan. When looking at or through Queensland history, you might come across the whole notion of the Duke of York tribe or the Duke of York subgroup. Then the area of the Duke of York area was place of cultural responsibility. I'm talking about the sub-clan, was between the Brisbane River and the Pine River. To the south side of the Brisbane River, you had the Coorparoo clan. Their area of cultural responsibility was between the Brisbane River and the Logan, the outer realms of the Logan catchment. To the southwest of the Coorparoo clan, you had the Chipara clan. To the east of the Coorparoo, you had the Mulruben clan. And north of the Dakiyaka clan, we had the Ningi clan. Their area of cultural responsibility was between Limba Creek. It took in most of the eastern side of Caboolture, and it also included the Redcliffe Peninsula. So it was between Limba Creek and the Pine River. When I normally do a welcome to country, that is done as a blessing of a gathering in a song. I will do that in a tinchy while, but I would like to express some more about my people. We were actually documented as being extinct or on the verge of extinction back in the 1860s, the very early 1860s. In fact, Tom Petrie of the modern day founding family of modern day Brisbane actually said he had only known of the 5 of the old Brisbane tribe when he was interviewed at the select committee hearing into the activities of the native police way back then in 1861 actually. I've got a bit of frog in my throat, so I hope you don't mind if I have a little cough, and it's not COVID, it's just too much overworking the vocal cords from singing. There we go, I've got some more singing to do in a little while. That's all. Yeah, and I have to say this, and I don't want to detract from the welcome in a big way, but the Turrbal people here, we have been, I suppose, there's this political push to try and superimpose another group on us here. I suppose even when you ring up to say, oh, we want to welcome to country for A, B, C and D, you'll have the Department of Aboriginal Affairs here telling people, oh, these people you can go to. But under federal law, we are the last claim standing under state law legislation, yet they choose to ignore that process under their laws, where we are the only ones you're supposed to be coming to talk about cultural stuff on lands that we're on our traditional, on our native title claim. This all comes into play, so yeah. So I just want to say, because I saw a big poster down the road with my Turrbal nieces, and they live in Mornington Island because their mother's a Mornington Island woman, but their father's my brother. And their first cousin is Charlie Cameron for the Brisbane Lions. Big poster on the road. Oh, this is Yagara and Turrbal land. No such thing. No such thing as Yagara ever in primary evidence for the Brisbane area. The Yugarapul people had identified where they come from, and it wasn't in Brisbane, and their current claim does not come as far as Brisbane. There's a lot of silly stuff going on in the community, but we will address that issue in the future. But I have to tell people this because it's like people trying to smother your voice, trying to make out you don't exist. They're not happy that they killed you, practically killed you off first up, but you know, like going on 200 years ago. So our voice is small, but we are who we are. We can't change the truth or the fact. We survived that near genocide. And yet, while some people don't like the idea of, you know, there's an element in the psyche of a lot of people in power or even striving for power, trying to, especially non-Aboriginals, they still think they can tell us who we are, where we came from, and they use what I call fine weather blackfellas. Fine weather blackfellas, because we had a tripartite system in Queensland, the other states did not have it. You had a choice to give up your Aboriginality. So they, a lot of this mob would want to jump back on the black side of the fence, you know. So they get used against us. I mean, that's divide and conquer, been going down through the centuries all around the globe. But I just wanted to make that little statement. Now I pushed that over there, but it's just a little thought over there. And I will continue with the Welcome to Country. When I do the Welcome to Country, that is done as Blessing of the Gathering in a song. I mentioned that earlier. Normally, I've chosen this, unlike some rugby league players, Indigenous ones who choose not to, but I've included an extract of the Australian National Anthem in my Welcome to Country as a statement of reconciliation, because I believe in the Australia we're going to be, not so much the Australia we was, even although we have to reflect on that stuff every now and then. So I will include that in my thing, Welcome to Country. That will be followed by the Blessing of the Gathering, and then I will exit with a song from my birthplace, which is Cherbourg Aboriginal Settlement. I mentioned the whole tripartite system that came into existence, and that started in 1897 with the Aborigines Protection Act, which later became the Aborigines Protection and Preservation Act. And me, myself, I think it did what it was meant to do, and that was to protect and preserve. Because prior to those laws, our populations had plummeted. Here in Brisbane, when Petrie was talking about, he had only known of 5 of the old Brisbane tribe left. Prior to European occupation here in Brisbane, we were in the thousands. So I'm not into blaming, you know, that's the way it went down. I want to work towards the future stuff, you know, how we can work together, because I'm proud of being Australian as well. Okay, I'm Aboriginal, very proud of that. But my Australian heritage started with convicts. My great, it was actually adopted into the Turrbal tribe here in Brisbane. It came on a convict ship in 1816. Then my African-American great-grandfather came to Australia for the gold rush in 1830. Half of his foot was chopped off, which would mean prior to that, he tried to run away from the slave farm over there in America prior to succeeding when he came to Australia. That's what my father told me. And, oh yeah, most of my, one of my grandmothers is only quarter Aboriginals, the rest British, the other is half Aboriginal, and she's half Scot, so that's the way things are. Now I will start doing the Welcome to Country. I think I've said enough, eh? It's in that, yeah, I better start. I share the same birth date as Abraham Lincoln, so, but I wouldn't want to share his fate. Now, when I do this, welcome, because he's the one that freed the slaves, wasn't he? When I do this, start the anthem, I will explain what it is. Yadani, Australia Boo, advance Australia in strength. People of Australia, let us make a good spirit place, for we are from the ancient, we are of the past and the present, and we are all Australia's future. I was asked to write that for the Indigenous All-Stars game a few years ago, and I decided, why not shove it in my Welcome to Country? So, mind you, I'm the one that really messed up the national anthem back in 1993. Standing in the middle of the Melbourne cricket ground on grand final Saturday, lined up, one of the sides, the other side. I think it was all that testosterone there. The lady couldn't keep her focus. So somebody wrote, and I knew I messed it up, but somebody wrote on the internet, oh, I think this one, she sounds a bit like a goat. And I'm thinking to myself, talking to my daughter, because I don't know all this modern language, I'm sure this person doesn't mean the greatest of all times, because to me, I'm only part, like 1/4 Brit, and I'm still trying to come to terms with the anthem and it's the wording of it. I think the nation is, from what I read and saw last year also, because as a child, all I knew on a mission or reserve up the road was, God save our gracious Queen. And that was easy to understand because the woman's picture was practically on top in front of every classroom. So, and I didn't mind singing praises to her. Okay. Dagatin Australian Nabayagari Murumbaga Da Kolamai Kiperandangala Hugh Biggie Numbai Kita Millen Murumba Bulkairi Yarini Australia Boo. I'd like to thank the organisers for having us here in this capacity today. The blessing of the gathering.
And a big thank you to Songwoman Maroochy. Thank you. Well, good morning and welcome to the Queensland Bioeconomy Forum 2021, where we are discussing supercharging the state's bioeconomy. My name is Madonna King and I'm your MC for a day that we hope will inform and challenge all of us to understand better what we mean by the bioeconomy and the challenges and the opportunities it might offer, how its various tentacles fit together, who are the players globally and also here in Queensland. Medical biotechnology, biomed is a crucial player in that bioeconomy, but it's covered well in other forums and as such is not a direct part of today's discussions. The urgency of climate change certainly will be, though. Its impact runs across the land and sea, including our regional communities. We need to look at new sustainable practices that support an economic transition, and developing a stronger bioeconomy is an important part of that transition. Throughout the day, we will look at what is happening internationally, the global perspective, and how that is relevant to us sitting here in Queensland. You'll hear how some 60 countries now have launched strategies to develop a bioeconomy, and that trend is growing. A recognition that it can provide the answers and deliver solutions to some of our big problems. And we'll explore all this today with a host of expert panels run by moderators who understand this better than most. What are our emerging strengths? What is the role of our researchers? The importance of regional Queensland. That's inside this room. Out in the foyer throughout the day, you can see the first draft of the Queensland Bioeconomy Strategic Visualisation Tool and provide feedback. This was launched late last year and it helps business and industry understand Queensland's research strengths and capabilities in 7 emerging industries with global growth potential. The Bioeconomy Visualisation Tool is the 8th industry sector the Department of Environment and Science has visualised, and as you would expect, it's a broader representation cutting across some of those original 7 sectors. It was developed to share at today's forum so that you, our delegates, could see it and provide feedback, and we would really welcome that. A few housekeeping issues before we get underway. We are operating under a COVID-safe plan. Please observe social distancing. There's plenty of signs alerting you to what you need to do. Sit down if you can when you're eating and drinking, and when you're moving around, wear your mask. You needn't wear it when you are seated. We're also limiting the amount of contact points, and to that end, on the back of your lanyard there is this QR code which allows you to access the program, speaker bios and ask questions. It's all intuitive, but if there are any problems, please see the team at the registration desk. And now to officially open our conference, please join me in welcoming the Minister for Environment and Science, the Honourable Meaghan Scanlon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madonna, and thank you very much for having me here today. Can I also just start by respectfully acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today and thank Maroochy for her welcome to country. Can I also, of course, acknowledge Claire Baines, the CEO of Life Sciences, who has moved and trying to make eye contact, and of course Professor Hugh Possingham, our Queensland's Chief Scientist. There's a number of people who I want to acknowledge, so please just let me go through it and I'll try and be as quick as I can. But I think it's important all of these individuals are recognised. We of course also have all of our Life Science Queensland board members attending today. Professor Saga, Professor Alan Rowan from UQ, Professor Ian O'Hara, the Deputy Director of QUT's Centre for Agriculture and Bioeconomy, Professor Gary Schenk of the School of Chemistry and Molecular Biosciences, University of Queensland. Of course, all of the speakers throughout today and the rest of the session and panel members, and of course everyone else here today, guests and delegates. It is a great privilege to be able to present to you today. It's nice to be in a room together after being in lockdown for a period, and I think really is a testament to the work that's been done in this state to try and keep Queenslanders safe. And I really want to acknowledge the work particularly of scientists and experts who have who have done so much work to be in the position that we're in today. And so if you have played a part in that in a small way, I want to recognise you as well. We've obviously been dealing with the global pandemic as a priority, but there's some other challenges that I think collectively we've all been trying to deal with as well. And of course, just the week before last, the IPCC report was handed down, and I think, clearly outlines that the relationship that we have with our planet is out of balance and that we need to do more. And I think we as a Queensland government acknowledge that we need to do more, and I think governments across the nation and the world are acknowledging that more needs to be done. Probably not as rapidly as some of us would like it to happen, but at least I think there's more and more awareness. And that's partly what today is about, is that we need to transform the way we eat, how we generate energy and how we live more sustainably. And I know that Life Sciences' slogan is feed, heal and fuel the world. And I just want to acknowledge the work that Life Science has been doing around sustainability, and that really should be commended. But as I said, we're all dealing with a global pandemic at the moment, and I think it's important that we recognise some of the incredible work that's happening right in this state in allowing us to respond to COVID-19 and allowing some local companies to really benefit as well, and showing that this is not only important in terms of the impact it has on individuals, but it's also important in terms of how it impacts the creation of jobs in local communities. We've had advances in including diagnostics by Antiotech. We've had vaccines such as the University of Queensland's molecular clamp technology, COVID treatments such as the antiviral developed by the Mackenzie's Health Institute at Griffith University. But of course, as we continue to deal with COVID-19, we still need to not forget the other very important challenges of climate change, which we're all continuing to work towards. And we need to be looking at more sustainable practices, such as reducing food waste and creating more novel foods to feed a growing population. And I think it wasn't by accident that the Premier very clearly allocated portfolios. Mine is science and the environment, the Great Barrier Reef and youth affairs, all in which I think have great synergy. So many young people are demanding change, not only in action on climate, but also in making sure that we live more sustainably. We're doing a whole lot of reform in the waste space at the moment to try and eliminate the amount of waste that goes to landfill and use things as a resource rather than them being a single-use practice. So there is an enormous amount of work happening behind the scenes, but of course we continue to listen to the experts, because I think if we've learned anything through this pandemic, frankly, politicians should be listening to the experts, because you're the ones who know the detail that we need to really be listening to if we're going to put Queensland in a position that will mean that we will be the leader in the future. And I think Queensland has so many incredible opportunities with our large land mass. We're also to some degree the most exposed, and so it really shows that we do need to shift. I won't be able to unfortunately stay throughout the whole day today, but I think a number of our team will be here. Mark and Julia will be here as well, and of course the Chief Scientist. I'm actually going to the Reef Expert Independent Panel, so it's been a wonderful day of listening to experts. But I just want to say thank you very much, and thank you for Life Sciences for putting on this event. It's a great opportunity for us to talk about all of those new and emerging sectors that we want to be a part of, and thank you very much for putting this on. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Minister. And now to our first session with Moderator Professor Hugh Possingham, Queensland's Chief Scientist. Now, bios are provided via the QR code on your lanyard, but can I just point out that Professor Possingham is a conservation scientist and a mathematician who has held positions across university, public and not-for-profit sectors. He's the winner of 2 Eureka Prizes, worked for every level of government, and is currently on the board of directors of BirdLife Australia. He's published more than 650 peer-reviewed publications, and we are absolutely delighted that he will guide our discussions this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Hugh Possingham.
Thanks a lot, Madonna. Madonna also said that all the moderators were experts, and I'm the exception that proves that rule. So I actually don't know a lot about the bioeconomy, and I'm very glad that the Life Sciences Queensland put on this entire day symposium to inform their chief scientist. So I can inform the Minister, who I think already knows more than me about this particular topic. So I'm here to learn. I think it's an exciting day. Reading some of the documents behind the bioeconomy, I suppose, as the Minister said, this is all about sustainability, about circular economy, about reuse, about fuel, about medicine and food. So there's such a diverse range of topics here. And having a day when the Queensland community can hear from experts from overseas and get their head around what's happening here and now in the last year or two, the opportunities for getting together have been very limited. So the fact we can all catch up, I think, is an extremely useful function for this day today. So obviously always, of course, the intersession times are sometimes more important than the session times. So as I say to any one of my 200 PhD students and postdocs, the important session is the tea break and the coffee break and the lunch break, and meeting as many new people that you haven't met before. So there is a diversity of talks here. I'd also briefly like to say that the Office of the Queensland Chief Scientist worked very closely with Life Sciences Queensland on promoting the bioeconomy, but I'd also like to recognise two previous Chief Scientists, Paul Birch and Christine Williams. I know Paul at least is here. Christine chairs Life Sciences Queensland. Again, they actually do know something about the topic, and they've been huge advocates and leaders in this space. So that's wonderful. But without further ado, I think we can go on. We're going to have a series of talks. We're going to move fairly quickly from talk to talk. If you do have questions, you can, through that app, ask questions. I don't quite know whether we're going to get time to ask them all, but I'll be watching them as we go. But the first speech we have is from Jim Philp, Science and Technology Policy Analyst from the OECD, and it is pre-recorded, and somebody's going to press a button.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted for me to be here with you today to share some of our thoughts on synthetic biology in a bioeconomy, mostly from a policy perspective, and this is more or less an OECD perspective. So let me tell you who we are. You'll see that in the title slide here that I belong to a working party called Bio, Nano, Converging Technologies, BNCT. So our business has been over the years mostly looking at bioeconomy and biotechnologies, particularly industrial biotechnology, but I do other areas such as sustainability. So our landmark publication was, I guess it was in 2009, the Bioeconomy to 2030, Designing a Policy Agenda. And way back then, you see the top quote here was that we decided that the bioeconomy was a set of economic activities around about biotechnology. So you'll be aware that the bioeconomy has moved on considerably from that. And then you look at the quotation at the bottom here. What we were asking for was innovative policy frameworks to move forward with these global challenges. Now, we haven't really seen that, but I'll return to those the policy frameworks in my very last slide today. So why has it moved on a lot since 2009? Well, there's a little bit of work here. What you're seeing here in the bars is the number of times that these particular words appear per page on national bioeconomy strategies. So blue is biotech, red is synthetic biology, and green sustainability. So if you look across these national bioeconomy strategies, you'll see that the sustainability is always there. But there are very few cases where synthetic biology is placed up front in a bioeconomy strategy. It's really only the United States and the United Kingdom that have taken this really to heart. And there's been an update in the offing recently from the United States, and that policy hasn't changed. That synthetic biology is still right up there in the bioeconomy thinking in the United States. If you look finally here at the last two bars, you'll see that biotechnology was well represented in the EU in the strategy of 2012, but in the update from 2018, the word biotechnology has almost disappeared, and we're not quite sure why all this should have happened. So one of the areas I want to cover just now is some work we've been doing over, I guess, the last 3 or 4 years and looking at public infrastructures that would be necessary for engineering biology. And I'm going to equate or conflate synthetic biology and engineering biology for the purposes of the meeting here. So where you see engineering biology, it's more or less what we would say is synthetic biology as well. So when we had a little workshop in Imperial College in London in 2018, almost 3 years ago, look at that top quotation. Biotechnology takes too long, costs too much, and fails too often to effectively address the global challenges that must be solved. Anybody that's been in biotechnology labs for any length of time will appreciate the truth of this, because one of the problems with biotech has always been, if you look at the first bullet, is the lack of standards and reproducibility and reliability. And one of the things that we're always aware of is that for most of the life of biology, it's been a data poor science, but suddenly in the genomic era, it's cast into being a data rich science. In fact, almost you could say there is far too much in the way of data now. So this has been a very recent transition, a transition of this century from being data poor to data rich, and that has many implications. My other message from this is, if biotechnology is to take up a place in manufacturing, then there's got to be a significant shift towards an engineering attitude in biology. And that little diagram on the right there is about the design, build, test, and produce cycle, which is characteristic of engineering, and that has always been absent from biotech. And some of these other bullets here you'll appreciate as an audience. As far as I'm concerned, this presentation is available when I'm finished, so you can look up some of these other bullets. So this is one of the things we looked at the workshop in 2018, and we wrote it up for a short paper in Trends in Biotechnology. What we're feeling is that in the whole biotech manufacturing business, that there is a part of the thing is missing, and that's about the part which solves the problems of reliability and reproducibility, which is being called the biofoundry. And here we're talking about public biofoundries, i.e. funded by the taxpayer to get the business going. So this is a cycle of design, build, test, and learn, and the iterations of this to get to an organism which would be more or less optimized for any particular business. And this has always been missing. And then you see that organism or that biocatalyst would then either going to scale up in something like a biorefinery or scale out in the pharmaceutical world. But there's also critical to this is scale down. In other words, the biorefinery could report back to the biofoundry that there has been a problem, that the organism is suboptimal, and then the digital information can be fed back to the biofoundry to go through further iterations to further optimize the organism. And this is something we see in practice now in a small number of locations. So at the time, I don't know if this is completely up to date, there were a small number of these public biofoundries around the world, and I put it in brackets here of elite facilities. We all know that if technology is going to be diffused into society, then it has to escape from elite facilities. So there have to be, in other words, many more of these public biofoundries. And this is a message for policymakers that this is about getting these facilities into things like public universities and research institutes. I'll look at the example here of the UK, which has been very successful in doing this from a very early start, around about 2013, I guess. Now you see here that there has been a relatively large public investment of about £350 million sterling, creating 5 biofoundries around the country, 6 basic research centres, and in London, the Industrial Translation Centre. Now, the way it's set up is also rather clever. For example, up in Edinburgh, the biofoundry mostly concentrates on mammalian cells. Manchester, it's about bio-based chemicals. Norwich, it's about food. Cambridge is in plants. And as I say, we have this Industrial Translation Centre to service them all roundabout in London. One of the things we also have looked at in one of our projects is the emergence of biological resource centres. Are they different? I would say at this stage they are different in that the biological resource centres are more about curation of, excuse me, the known biology. So we think these are going to become much more important because of projects like the Earth Biogenome Project, which is supposed to be going to sequence all eukaryotes that are known. So this is a huge leap, and this will create masses of data. And we asked the question, would the biofoundries merge with the biological resource centres? I think that's entirely possible in future. And here I've tried to show you this relationship between resource centres, basic research centres, and biofoundries, and the industry sectors that they service. So our feeling is that this indeed, as digitalisation proceeds, we could see a merger, not completely, but we can see how rather easily there could be a merger with the biofoundries. So biological resource centres we call the curators of the known biology, and the biofoundries are the creators of the new biology. And we've seen some public-private alliances. Well, I've mentioned the Global Biofoundries Alliance. On the left here, the Engineering Biology Research Consortium is based in the United States, but is international in its aspect. And they have produced a very detailed industrial roadmap for engineering biology or synthetic biology for the years to come. And that is open to, I guess, to almost all public research organizations, but there is also considerable industrial input to that process. So one of the other issues facing the future is, are we going to hit a data crunch, or is this just more hype on the internet? It appears that if we want to store all of the data that we want to store, then we're going to run out of microchip grade silicon. And one of the ways to overcome this, outlandish as it sounds, is to store data in DNA. Maybe it sounds outlandish, but in fact, this has started to be offered as a service. A company like Twist Bioscience is starting to offer storage of data in DNA, and of course, its recovery. It's rather expensive just now, but the idea is, of course, that as it becomes more popular, that technology will reduce in price. So one of the things we've looked at over the last few years as well is this whole issue of distributed manufacturing, which came to us, I guess, from 2015, when the World Economic Forum decided that distributed manufacturing was one of its top 10 emerging technologies for that year, for 2015. And it kind of set my head scratching a little bit, because what we're talking about here is making small-scale factories, where right now there has been always a trend towards a huge scale of production, and replace as much of the material supply chain as possible with digital information. Would this be suitable in biology? More responsive supply chains, and critically, make locally and consume locally, although many of my client countries say, yes, it's make locally, but also consume globally. So here is one of my problems with this. I've come from big oil and big chemistry, and I use here the example of Ludwigshafen in Germany, where you have very much centralized production rather than distributed manufacturing. You have 39,000 employees on site, 200 production plants, and how on earth could a small-scale production facility compete on price without policy intervention? And the bottom photograph I've kept in here to illustrate to you that many people are always saying that chemical production is somehow inefficient, but you see here that in this case, even the raw materials, something like 90% of those raw materials come down the river, so they don't clog up roads, they don't clog up railways. In fact, chemical production is far from being inefficient at all. So let me look at some of the stuff we started to do, and I've highlighted the date here was October 2019. This was before the pandemic, and when I looked at some of these business models here, well, you'll see number 2 is one I've just described, is a sector, the chemical sector, which is dependent on economies of scale to make things large, centralized, to bring down prices. But then it's going to be very difficult, as I say, to make that work. But it could work in sectors which are independent of economies of scale. And then in October 2019, the sector I worked on to prove the point was in fact the vaccines industry, which it turned out was in quite a, wasn't in a very great state at the time, because it was very difficult to make money from producing vaccines. R&D is very expensive, and the facilities themselves, if you have to build BSL-3 laboratories, etc., containment facilities, is an expensive business, and it's been difficult over the some decades to make vaccine production profitable. So that is one sector we looked at where we said, okay, this distributed manufacturing model seems to work. So we in fact, this one is only coming out, this little paper that's coming from that work is coming out, it's just coming out now in print in September of this year. So one of the things we're saying here, if you look at this, and remember I mentioned, was we were trying to, in the distributed manufacturing model, to replace actual transport by digital transport. And this was just a model we built at the time about a year ago on the basis these places that are mentioned were places which have a particular expertise in these different areas of design, test, build, etc. So the idea here is that you're not shuffling vaccines around the world, you're shuffling digital information to the final point of production, which could be right down even to the point of care, and might even be possible to do this in a mobile lab. And here is what we've been thinking here. This isn't our own diagram. This has come from another paper where the authors were looking at making mobile BSL-3 laboratories in very remote locations. And we said, well, what is to stop you from making vaccines in a small production facility like this, say in rural locations in Africa? And we've thrown this around different places, including the Office of Science and Technology at the White House. And to date, we haven't really come up against any opposition to this model. And we were particularly worried that this was just some academic ideas that would prove impossible in the mobile setting. One of the things that has come up is people have said that the regulators would be against this because they need an actual physical address where they can post literature. But none of the arguments about this have been that this technically is impossible. So where are we in policy? I'm going to look here very much at the bigger picture, because in the OECD now there are 38 countries, and we're always having to, by that very nature of the size of that organization, look at bigger pictures. We can't really look in detail at each country's individual situation. So one of the things we've been saying for all the time I've been in the OECD since 2011, that there is a long, long way to go yet in making a level playing field for bio-based. Now, back in 2011, not so many people were worried about this, but you'll be aware now with all the talk about climate, about wildfires, about flooding, and how it's all about human intervention, then this is now a daily occurrence in the literature and in media such as news websites. So if you look here at the investments in biofuels and biogases, they are actually there. They're to the right of the red column for coal. So you'll see there that whatever we may think since 2013 with the Paris Agreement, we're still seeing that the investments in these renewable fuels is far, far lower than the investments in oil and gas and even coal. Coal is down, but certainly not out yet. So there are many reasons why that we ought to invest. Apart from simply about emissions reductions, there are plenty of reasons to invest in this. For example, you see there about new jobs and high-tech jobs. This is published by the IEA, the International Energy Agency, which is a sister organization of the OECD. Another thing we've been talking about at the OECD and the IEA for many years is phasing out fossil fuel subsidies. These are in fact an anomaly. I think this is the largest subsidy system in the world, and you'll be aware that subsidies are usually used to get an industry standing on its own 2 feet, and then when they are, then the subsidies are phased out slowly or removed completely. But the fossil industries are over 100 years old, and here yet we see these huge subsidies by governments in fossil fuel, usually in fossil fuel consumption. And that has been an issue for us over the years of trying to persuade countries to phase out these subsidies, because when you do that, then these monies that would become available, if allied to a carbon tax, could be used to fund this revolution that we're talking about in replacement of fossil with bio in the bioeconomy. So this is my last slide, and it harks back to a lack of innovative policy frameworks. And one of the things I'm saying here is that that everything is connected, and this makes great big problems for policymakers. Now, in this particular audience, I guess that the most interesting of these policies are the targeted R&D programs and specific education and training programs. So that's all very well, and governments we could say to governments, you should invest heavily in synthetic biology for the future bioeconomy. But if you look at the arrow I'm pointing to there, it says, well, if you spend that money, governments, what's the problem then is you don't have a market, because you might still be competing with fossil, which is still cheaper. So there are various ways to develop that market. A very efficient way would be public procurement of bio-based products. Public procurement is an enormously powerful tool for making a market, because in OECD countries, round about 12 or 13% of the total GDP is in public procurement. And also a tax on CO2 emissions I touched on earlier. These would start to make a market for bio-based products. So then I say to you, okay, you've taken that step, you've done the targeted R&D to get synthetic biology going, and you've done other things like the specific training and education. You've started to make a market, but then let's look at the feedstock. And the feedstock in this case is biomass. And we have to then say, is that biomass sustainable? In other words, if we stimulate the market and then you stimulate greater influences of things like illegal logging and illegal unregulated fishing, then we'll have a bioeconomy that is unsustainable. So all of this effort would have been for nothing. So in this is a reason why we're saying all of these things are connected, and you could make many, many other of these connections, which is going to be a real headache for policymakers to try and sort out from the start all the way through to the market and products, how we're going to make this happen. One of the other things we have to think about, of course, and this is my final comment, is we don't have the luxury of having time to make the mistakes, because we see now the wildfires, the floods, all the effects of climate change. We've got to get this right at the first time. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time.
Thanks, Jim. And you can applaud away. He can't hear you because it's pre-recorded and he's asleep somewhere, assumably in the United Kingdom. Great stuff there. Lots of things. The thinking about DNA as a way of storing data. And the one that always baffles me is fossil fuel subsidies. Some chief scientist should be able to sort that out. Or I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, we're now, from a very inspiring and far-ranging talk, we're very privileged to have Ashleigh and Jaine Morris here, who are the CEO and the CEO of Coreo, the company. So it's great to have the private sector here, and we're very privileged to have you talk to us about your work. Thank you.
They're taped together. Good morning, everybody. My name's Jaine Morris, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Coreo.
And I'm Ashleigh Morris. I'm the CEO of Coreo.
So what a privilege to be standing in front of you today. Thank you, Songwoman from Maroochy, for welcoming us to your country. It is a deep privilege to be standing on the lands of the Turrbal people. And can I just say how much I loved all of the things you taught us and the narrative you shared. So thank you. We would also like to acknowledge Life Sciences Queensland and the diverse participants that are taking part in today's Bioeconomy Forum. We believe harnessing the power of the bioeconomy is the equivalent of harnessing the hearts and minds of everybody in this room today. So we're here to give it a crack. Over the next 15 minutes, we will explore what the bioeconomy is, how it relates to Queensland now, and the opportunity it can have for our state moving forward. We will discuss the interwoven concepts of biomimicry, circular economy, and planetary boundaries. And we will look at pragmatic examples of the bioeconomy in action and practical examples of application.
So first, let's step back. No doubt you've read or discussed the latest IPCC report. It has been met with an air of panic amidst calls for technology innovation and investment to save us. We need to accelerate the move to carbon sequestration. Now it's great to see people are finally panicking. And it's true, technology will help move us forward. But let's calm down and ask, are we missing the point? Nature has already developed the most efficient and magnificent carbon sequestration devices ever, plants and soil. The concept of the bioeconomy seeks to understand the majesty of nature and incorporate these advanced systems and processes into our human-made designs. Nature has been working on biotechnologies for billions of years. 50 million years ago, there was the Azolla event, which saw the blooming of ferns en masse. This event drew down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and helped take the Earth from the greenhouse gases to the cooler climate humans know today. And that's pretty amazing. In essence, the bioeconomy harnesses this wonder and looks to nature as the mother of all innovation. We have so much to learn.
We each bring deep knowledge, but can we walk away with shared knowledge? We each bring immense value, but can we walk away with a mandate for shared value creation?
At Coreo, working daily across boardrooms and cotton fields, in mining, fashion, and many sectors in between, with government, industry, and community groups, we often say we can't do it all, and we can't do it alone. The purpose of today is to progress the evolution of a new economic system, one that harnesses the untapped potential of our biological resources, the bioeconomy. We believe what is needed is another industrial revolution, but this time a bio-inspired one. We face dire planetary, economic, and resource-based challenges right now, and we must act today. The question is, what do we do? The answer? Start immediately from where we are with what we have. Systemic problems require a myriad of solutions, co-created by a network of big-hearted leaders, us, all of us here. There is no one-size-fits-all bioeconomy, rather the potential for several bioeconomies to coexist together.
So let's pull in some of the threads of this bio terminology. The bioeconomy brings together science, engineering, and art to produce nature-aligned design. Biomimicry is a thought process seeking inspiration, asking the question, what would nature do? Biotechnology answers the question by studying and learning from natural processes and techniques. So where does the biocircular economy fit in? The circular economy is built on three principles: designing out waste, innovating for regenerative practice, and keeping products and materials at their highest value for as long as possible. These principles represent the what we can achieve, underpinning the bioeconomy's how we can achieve it. In the words of biomimicry pioneer Jaine, the more stressful the environment, the more likely you are to see plants working together to ensure mutual survival. The bioeconomy represents a departure from a competitive view of the world where every organism, plants and people alike, are out to consume as much as they can for themselves. The bioeconomy is more like a neural network of support. Benyus teaches us that complex exchanges of goodness, both above and below ground, are happening in extraordinary ways. By aligning industrial processes with nature's cycles, we see efficiency increase and waste become eliminated. We have long harvested nature as a resource. Now it's time to harness the knowledge held within nature as an even greater resource. For example, did you know that mycelium fungus can clean polluted soils, create insecticides, treat smallpox and even flu viruses? Did you know that the detrimental scaling of inside pipes has been solved by looking at the scaling inside seashells and imitating their stop protein that halts the shiny scales from growing? Or have you come across algae-based products that clean polluted air, replace fast fashion with biogarments, and filter toxic chemicals and heavy metals out of the water?
Harnessing the bioeconomy does not mean we do less or have less or even profit less. Instead, the bioeconomy means we do more with less. It is important to note that baked into the bioeconomy discourse is the belief that this economic model unlocks productivity and profitability. It is not a shutting down of industry, but an unshackling of industry from centuries-old assumptions. The White House's bioeconomy blueprint specifically notes that a bioeconomy is one based on the use of research and innovation to create economic activity and public benefit. The European Commission likewise emphasises the importance of a bioeconomy as growing new industries and jobs. The bioeconomy approach sees productivity and growth hand in hand with renewable, bioavailable solutions. The bioeconomy is the economy of the future. We have little choice but to replace our outdated notions of infinite economic growth that rely on finitely available resources. This needs to be replaced with a regenerative bio-circular economy. Transitioning to a successful bioeconomy is not as hard as it sounds. Many would say that science has led us to where we are now. The truth is, science does not lead, nature does. MIT Innovation Team's Professor Louis Brewer says, "We knew how to breed animals before we understood genetics. We knew how to create catapults before we understood gravity. We have everything we need if we only be humble and look." We need to keep asking the central question to realise our bioeconomic future. What would nature do? What would nature do?
By 2050, the global population is expected to grow from 7.5 billion to nearly 10 billion people. And research tells us that while moving to renewable energy and implementing energy efficiency measures can tackle 55% of global greenhouse gas emissions, to achieve the UN climate goals, the remaining gap relies on implementing circular economy strategies. We must dramatically change how we produce and consume key materials. We are inefficient and we are also very wasteful. One of the major challenges in our attempt at a bioeconomy is that we are not replacing resources at the rate they are being taken. In Australia, we generate only $1.28 of output for every kilogram of resource we consume, which is less than half of the OECD benchmark. And globally, 91% of all raw materials are wasted after their first use. We value convenience and we value what's new. But our take, make, waste economy sees value slipping through the cracks. Where others see waste, we see a wasted opportunity. We need a cultural shift that reframes waste as a valuable resource. Nature is a wasteless system. How can we learn from her? Because when we reframe our worldview, the untapped value of the bioeconomy is all around us.
Bio-waste is estimated to reach up to 138 million tonnes per year in the European Union, of which up to 40% is landfilled. Yet this has high potential to add value to our agricultural production. Food waste represents another significant opportunity. 1/3 of the world's food is wasted today, and food waste costs our economy $20 billion every year and accounts for more than 5% of Australia's global greenhouse gas emissions. But to view the bioeconomy as just about waste management is another wasted opportunity. It's important to note that, like the circular economy, the bioeconomy has a fundamental value proposition, not of doing less bad, but of doing more good. Waste management is one part of the solution. Recreating the value of biofuels or biomass are important parts in the economy, it's true. However, we hope the discussion today at this forum goes beyond waste, because ultimately what we need to tackle as a community is our consumption-based design flaw. The real opportunity here is a future where there is no waste and there is no wasted resources.
And make no mistake, there is huge opportunity. One study from Deloitte Access Economics projected that by 2035, an industrial biotechnology and bioproduct sector could contribute $1.8 billion to Queensland's annual gross state product and support 6,640 full-time jobs in Queensland. The bioeconomy will also have a positive effect on a safer, healthier and cleaner future for generations to come. It even has a climate change mitigation potential of between 1 billion and 2.5 billion tonnes of CO2 equivalent per year by 2030, which, in case you didn't know, it's the equivalent of taking 500 million cars off the road for a year. Agriculture, forestry, fisheries and aquaculture. Industries using or processing biological resources such as food or the pulp and paper industries, as well as the chemical, biotechnological and energy industries. We are all invited to the bio party, the BYO mug. Oh, no one laughed. I thought I was going to get one laugh.
Now they are at you.
I know,
that's fine.
right? So each of the bioeconomy areas are what makes Australia competitive today. And if we work together across these industries, there will be no stopping us from being competitive tomorrow. We need to move quickly, though, and signal our intent to the world. Already, many countries, led by the EU, are shutting out environmentally impacting suppliers from their supply chains and instead creating closed supply loops whereby decarbonisation and zero emissions can be successfully controlled. Australia, we had better get our skates on.
And speaking of skating, Iceland, Norway, and many of the European nations, as well as Brazil and the US, already have in place action plans on the circular economy, action plans on the circular bioeconomy. These countries have benefited from strong government leadership and multi-policy support, including tax relief, loans, subsidies and grants, co-investment, investment attraction, and designating suitable land for development. The Queensland Climate Action Plan is directing $4 billion to large-scale renewable climate initiatives to achieve the goals of 50% renewable energy generation in Queensland by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050. As part of this movement, the government is committed to seeing biotechnology and bioproduct sector become a reality. However, our local ways of creating bio value remain limited to conventional biofuel technologies. We have to be more creative. The University of Queensland, James Cook University, and the University of Technology are providing leading research and development on biofuels, bioplastics, biochemicals, and also specialised agri-technology. How do we work together to harness and extend these opportunities? We need greater collaboration and communication between government and policymakers, the science base and business community. We need a bigger pipeline of world-leading opportunities, investment-ready opportunities. And we need the private sector capital to turn these skills and opportunities into products, profits, and jobs. Creating the right policies, markets, infrastructure, and innovative connections is urgently needed, and we cannot afford to get this wrong.
Over the course of this forum, we look forward to hearing more about the education and industry fostering local and global partnerships. Neri Oxman of the MIT Mediated Matter Group has built a framework for this. She outlines the relationship between 4 principles: science, engineering, design, and art. She says science translates information into the language of knowledge. Engineering translates knowledge into the language of function. Design translates function into the language of behaviour, and art translates behaviour into the language of culture. We think this perfectly sums up the work we are here to do today. So, may the bioeconomy emerge as a natural solution to our world's most complex challenges. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy Queensland's Bioeconomy Forum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jaine and Ashleigh, and that was certainly very inspiring and lots of good ideas. I like the multidisciplinarity from science, engineering, art and design. And for a tag team talk, it was beautifully choreographed. Sorry, I'm an old man. I get to do old man jokes. Third speaker in this set of opening keynotes is Lucas Nordee, and Lucas is one of a very small number of people who have been globally selected as a bioeconomy youth champion, and we're very lucky that he's here in Queensland and give us a short talk. Thanks, Lucas.
Just so you know, I have a fear of public speaking, so if I faint, you guys know what number to call. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank the organizers and the numerous mentors who have allowed me and guided me to be here. With a particular shout out to Professor Gary Schenk and Ian O'Hara. They were the first people who, basically told me to get involved with the bioeconomy, and here I am. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Lucas, and ever since I was little, I was very interested in science because as a kid, it appealed to my natural curiosity and sense of wonderment. I remember first watching a great white shark leap out of the water, and I was just like amazed by the natural sheer fear and awesomeness that creature bestowed on me. And ever since then, I wanted to understand like the many facets of science. So as I matured into my career, I realized that I wanted to be involved in actively enabling scientific innovation. And that's where I discovered the world of biotechnology and bioeconomy. Despite calling Australia a second home, I represented the country as a youth ambassador in the Global Bioeconomy Summit. The Global Bioeconomy Summit is the pinnacle of thought leadership where bioeconomy leaders from all around the world discuss the frontiers of research, value creation, and sustainability. While COVID prevented many of us from flying to Berlin, it was a thrilling and insightful experience. In my 5 minutes, I want to be able to highlight a few thoughts to ponder on about the bioeconomy. One of the most important realizations I learned in that summit was that a bioeconomy in Australia will look differently from that from one of the United States or Brazil or even Germany. It is up to our local ecosystem stakeholders to make this realization happen. However, that being said, one of the most underrepresented stakeholders are young people. It's ironic, after all, that's what the bioeconomy is for. We want to make a sustainable vision for the next generation. During the Global Bioeconomy Summit, while my fellow ambassadors focused on themes such as health, agriculture, biomaterials, energy, I focused on something I was passionate about and something that I think is crucial: education. Surprisingly, the workshop I hosted during the summit had the second most attendees, and it catalyzed my fear of public speaking even more. I am passionate about education, but not a stereotypical definition of education where I learn from a lecturer and I learn from a laboratory. I made sure my education wasn't confined to the university or classrooms. I refer to the learning through mechanisms and avenues that allow us to dive deep and explore real-life problems. As cliche as it seems, I look around the room and I know all of you are lifelong learners, because that is a prerequisite to innovation, isn't it? The last year and a half have proven how fragile the classroom setting is. I remember at the start of 2020 not even attending one single classroom lecture. My experience working with UQ, QIMR, and the ADF gave me real work experience. And through those mechanisms, I learned how to interact with researchers and the leaders of tomorrow and industry professionals, which in turn taught me how to dissect and empathize with problems. The lot of you in this room represent people from different backgrounds: academe, agriculture, research, manufacturing, automation, government, defense, consulting, and infrastructure. My message to you is this: mentor us and guide us. I guarantee you, if you talk to any of the young people right now, we are more than willing to learn what problem you're trying to solve, or what kind of profession you're in. In order to promote this kind of environment, there's a strong need for academia and industry to collaborate, and for federal and state government to incentivize this kind of collaboration. This has been the case exemplar for the US, in Europe, and even some countries like Brazil, Malaysia, and Indonesia. This is, in essence, the heart of the ecosystem and building innovation. You might be asking, what now? What exactly am I asking for? My minimum viable solution to this would be to create a youth network, training the next leaders for the bioeconomy. While Oz Biotech and Life Sciences Queensland are great champions for life sciences in Australia, there's a need for an organization and network to empower the next generation of the bioeconomy. I've personally witnessed the organic growth of an organization with the proper support and effective guidance. In mid-2019, I started a movement in UQ to basically create an organization that specifically focuses on empowering biotech students to look at their careers beyond the academe. around at that time, I started with support from the biotech staff and 3 other students. Right now, we're at a member of like 300 plus members, and we've had 4 industry events specifically catered or interacting with Brisbane-based biotech companies. So right now, we need proactive support to train the next generation of leaders. By doing this, we become more empowered and one step closer to becoming the leaders of the next generation's bioeconomy. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to learning more about the bioeconomy and what it entails.
Thanks a lot, Lucas. Getting industry, government and the university sector to work together more, that's my job, Lucas. I'll be retiring soon. It'll be advertised, so hopefully you'll apply. But certainly all those, as I say to many of my students, it's all the things you do at university that seem to have nothing to do with university that are probably more important than anything else. And that's a wonderful example of that work. Our next speaker is pre-recorded. It's Dr. Manfred Kircher, and he is a freelance advisor on the bioeconomy, and we will listen to him for 15 minutes. Make it be so.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor and a pleasure to speak today on this forum about the way to a circular bioeconomy. Thank you very much to the organizers. First, I will present the status of the European bioeconomy and today's global consumption of carbon. Next, I will discuss why the modern industrial bioeconomy needs to prioritize bio-based chemistry and why bio-based chemistry should have priority in the use of biomass. Then I will present how far and in which sectors of the chemical industry the bioeconomy is developed. To anticipate it, most of the way is still ahead of us. There are economic and technical reasons for this, but the economic policy framework also plays a decisive role. And finally, I will present a model for a long-term sustainable circular bioeconomy and name topics to debate in order to come to a comprehensive roadmap into the circular bioeconomy. On this graph, we see the current share of bio-based products in various European industries. The top lines show agriculture and forestry, food and feed, paper production, and wood processing. Here, the feedstock base is completely bio-based. This is the traditional bioeconomy. But as you can see in the lower lines, when it comes to textile fibers, pharmaceuticals, energies like heat, fuels and power, and chemistry, the share of bio-based products and energies is still low. These are sectors of the modern industrial bioeconomy. Bioenergies account for between 6% in the case of fuels and 16% in the case of heat. Chemicals are the tail light. The share of bio-based chemicals is only 4% in Europe. So there is no question that the transition into the modern industrial bioeconomy is still ahead of us. Well, we have just seen that the industrial sectors of textiles, pharmaceuticals, chemicals and energies are claiming to use bio-based resources and prepare to integrate themselves into the bioeconomy. The question is whether this can be sustainable in the long term. For that, we need to look at today's use of carbon. The outer ring shows that 2/3 of the total consumption of carbon is fossil carbon, almost all of which is used for energy production, as is given by the inner graph. Only about 1/3 of the total carbon consumed is bio-based. It is mainly used for nutrition, especially for breeding animals, and generating heat. Although carbon-containing materials and chemicals are partly bio-based, these sectors still are dominated by fossil carbon sources. The main message of this slide is that mankind is using 2 times more fossil carbon than bio-based carbon. Should the bioeconomy aim on completely replacing fossil carbon with bio-based sources? I don't think I need to prove that this would have no sustainable future when considering planetary boundaries and the already damaged ecosystem services. So what can the modern industrial bioeconomy realistically deliver? Which sectors do absolutely depend on carbon? The energy sector, meaning the generation of heat, fuels and electricity, can be decarbonized, at least to a large extent. That's why I advocate keeping the energy sector small in the bioeconomy. There are simply other alternatives to be prioritized. But organic chemistry cannot be decarbonized. It depends on carbon by definition, and therefore is and remains dependent on carbon. In the modern industrial bioeconomy, the focus therefore must be on materials and chemistry. Not using biological resources for bioenergy is also recommended for another reason, because we will see on the next slide that the feedstock supply of chemistry alone is to become a very big challenge. This slide shows how far and in which product groups bio-based chemistry has already become established in Europe. The table on the left is sorted according to the right column. It shows the share of bio-based products in the specific product segments. As we can see in the top lines, the share in cosmetics and surfactants, for example, is with 44%, respectively 31%, already relatively high. However, these products only have a modest production volume overall. They belong to the fine and specialty chemical sectors. Therefore, the impact on the total share of bio-based chemicals and on the footprint of chemicals in general is only little. By contrast, the bio-based share of basic and bulk chemicals, as it is represented by polymers, is only 2%. However, these chemicals are produced in the multi-million tons range. Biologizing such a sector would have a real impact. Polymers and basic chemicals in general need to be biologized on the way to climate-neutral chemistry. The graph on the right shows an estimation of today's distribution of bio-based chemicals. Although small by volume, fine and special chemicals dominate by far, and share of bio-based basic chemicals is only small. This distribution is the reason why the share of bio-based chemical products among all of them is only 4%. There is still a lot of room for improvement. Why is that? Why is the raw material change in chemistry progressing so slowly? There are two main reasons for this. One is the nature of biological raw materials and the characteristics of their processing. The other are, at least in Europe, the framework conditions I will show on the next slide. Let's look at raw materials on the left. On the positive side, green raw materials come from the natural carbon cycle, driven by solar energy, and are therefore in principle climate neutral. They also have an enormously wide range of applications, reaching from simple molecules like methane up to vaccines and monoclonal antibodies. But the very next point, functionalized biomolecules, is ambivalent. Functionalization is an advantage for many products in fine and specialty chemistry, as these products have to provide specific functionalities. But this is not true for basic chemistry. Molecules in this sector are in general not functionalized. The same applies to the high oxygen content. For products of fine and specialty chemistry, this can be an advantage. For basic chemistry, it is definitely a disadvantage, because their products are mostly reduced and for which a high oxygen content is definitely a major disadvantage. The low carbon density, complex composition and costly logistics must also be evaluated as a handicap. When looking on the right table about processing, we see pros and cons as well. On the pro side, standability of processing biofeedstocks, specifically in a climate neutral way. Also, the high specificity of biocatalysts and their broad range of reactions is a clear positive feature. However, compared to fossil-based processes, low carbon yield, limited scalability, batch processing, and expensive downstream processing are disadvantages and relevant cost factors. Depending on the product, there may be good reasons for switching to bio-based raw materials, but under the current market and framework conditions, there may also be arguments against it. The second reason that hinders the bioeconomy in the chemical industry lies in the framework conditions, in particular the European Emissions Trading Scheme. This slide shows how industrial emissions are classified. As is shown in the left table, they are classified according to energy-related and to product-related emissions. Scope 1 and 2 are predominantly energy-related emissions, and Scope 3 is the term used for emissions resulting mostly from the production, use and disposal of products. Therefore, Scope 3 includes emissions caused by the carbon bound in the products, for example, by biological degradation or incineration. As the chart shows, in Germany, about half of the emissions are energy-related and half are product-related. For our topic, it is now important to know that the emissions trading scheme captures only Scope 1 and 2, but not Scope 3. This means that energy-related emissions are costly for the industry, but emissions caused by processing, use and disposal of chemical products are free. This has huge implications for progressing the bioeconomy in the chemical industry. The large companies that produce base and bulk chemicals in particular, and are subject to the emissions trading schemes, are in fact focusing on switching to zero emissions energies. This is the most efficient way to reduce the burdens of the emissions trading scheme. In contrast, there is no incentive at all to convert the raw material base for the products themselves, meaning for bio-based chemistry. The chemical industry is therefore precisely following the control of the framework conditions, with the result that the raw material change in fine and specialty chemistry is progressing, but in the very large sector of monomers and basic chemicals, it is postponed to the future. Now, for sure, the feedstock change is only postponed, but will come in the medium to long term. Therefore, the question arises how the raw material demand of chemical industries can be satisfied sustainably. Can biomass become the essential carbon source in chemistry? The box on the left shows how much carbon is sequestered annually in chemical products in Europe. That is about 65 million tons of carbon. It is estimated that about twice this volume has to be fed into production processes because biotechnological processes involve high carbon losses. That gives a carbon demand of 130 million metric tons, for which at least 260 million metric tons of biomass must be provided, if biomass could be fully processed. Considering unusable fractions in the required volume of biomass is accordingly even higher. That would be about a quarter of the biomass produced in Europe as a whole. Obviously, it cannot be sustainable for bio-based chemical industry to rely on primary biomass alone. As today, this would overstretch the natural capacities again. Suitable alternatives must be found to relieve the burden. The chemical industry is also thinking about this, and a study on how to achieve a climate-neutral chemical industry by 2050 has concluded that biomass without doubt is on the way to become an important raw material for chemistry, but that waste recycling, especially of plastics, will also have to make an important contribution. Even more important will be the recycling of CO2. From 2040, it is assumed that CO2 will be increasingly used and has the potential to become even the most important carbon source. So the chemical industry is aiming for 3 carbon cycles: biomass-based, plastics recycling, and carbon capture and usage, in short, CCU. These carbon cycles, the natural one based on photosynthesis, carbon capture and usage, recycling, and in addition cascading of residuals are shown on this slide. However, there are two decisive differences between these carbon cycles. Firstly, the natural cycle of photosynthesis is the only cycle that uses carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The technical cycles of recycling and CCU avoid emission and keep the carbon gas in technical installations. Secondly, the natural cycle is fueled by the sun, but the technical cycles require reducing agents, mostly in the form of hydrogen, the production of which in turn consumes electricity. The energy demand, especially of CCU, is enormous. That's why major chemical companies are increasingly drumming up support for the expansion of zero-emission energy capacities. Some of you may question whether technical cycles can really be seen as part of the bioeconomy. Now, we must see that the progression of the bioeconomy is a dynamic process. I'm convinced that this view will realistically describe the bioeconomy in the long term. By 2050, the use of fossil carbon will increasingly decrease, and that of bio-based carbon will increase accordingly. Originally, fossil carbon will therefore be virtually diluted out of the processes, because this carbon is increasingly being introduced into industrial use in the form of biomass. In the long term, I therefore see not only photosynthesis, but also the technical cycle of carbon capture and use, recycling and cascading as equally important elements of a circular bioeconomy. However, this goes hand in hand with an important condition. As said before, for the technical cycles, the high energy demand must be satisfied in a sustainable way. Obviously, the path to the circular bioeconomy is not just a technical question, to which we, biotechnologists, can provide competent answers. The example of the emissions trading scheme has shown that how important the political framework conditions are. The framework conditions should not only push industry in the direction of the bioeconomy, they must also accelerate the implementation of bioeconomy technologies regardless of the source of the carbon. E-mobility is a good model for this, because the framework conditions promote it, even though the electricity mix is far from being emission-free. Maintaining competitiveness with non-European locations is another issue in order to avoid the exodus of companies. Carbon border adjustment mechanisms and carbon leakage regulations can serve as suitable instruments. Equally important are the economic conditions, namely, for example, cost of raw materials and zero-emission energies. Among social issues, acceptance is at the top of the list, which requires, in particular, factual and transparent information. For sure, we need technologies for all the carbon cycles I've described, and supporting legislation. And finally, the whole effort would not be worthwhile if the bioeconomy did not develop in an ecologically beneficial way. These topics, summarized in the term PEACEL, need to be discussed in order to come to an efficient transition strategy, to a roadmap, and finally to a framework that is more supportive than the actual one. And here your forum comes into play. This discussion needs a serious and reliable and transparent platform that is provided by this conference. I wish Queensland's Bioeconomy Forum a central communication role in our common path.
Thank you. Thanks, and lots of fascinating information there. Some may be more alarming than I wanted to be aware of. But our next speaker is in sort of real life. Michael Carus, who's the founding and managing director of the Nova Institute, is joining us via Zoom. So I'm pretty sure he's alive, and I'm pretty sure he's in Germany. And there he is. I don't know if you can hear me, but welcome. And thanks for joining us in this Bioeconomy Forum. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everybody. Yeah, my name is Michael Carus. Here is very deep night, but I'm still awake, and I would like to present some real market data to you. I'll share my screen. This is crazy. I can do it like this. Sorry. Yeah, it works not so as I want to have it. 1 second, please. Okay, now it works. Yeah, you can see my slide. Hello? Yes. Everything fine? Okay, great. Yeah, production capacities, market trends for bio-based building blocks and polymers. I'm presenting in a very few slides our company, this Nova Institute. And you see already this logo here, renewable carbon, because we're working on biomass, CO2 utilization, and recycling. These are the 3 non-fossil carbon sources, and we call them together renewable carbon. And I will show at the end of the presentation a very interesting group of companies joining the renewable carbon initiative. But this is the final slide in my presentation today. First on Nova Institute. It's a private independent institute. We founded in '94, and meanwhile we have more than 40 scientists from many different disciplines. So chemistry, I'm a physicist, polymer science, but also social science, economy, and so almost 40 different scientists from training in our institute. And our message is a smart transition to renewable carbon for the chemical and plastic industry. And we're doing it in 4 departments. One is technology and markets, where I present today the results of market research. They do market research and technology scouting. Department sustainability. Here mainly work on life cycle assessments for new chemicals and plastics. Communication, a very important issue. Communication, if you have developed something very nice, you need the right communication to the market, to NGOs, to the political area, to really get your products successful on the market. And last but not least, economy and policy. We're also analyzing the policy in Europe, but also in Asia and US to help companies to find the right pathway in the policy jungle. Today, policy is more impacting than ever the chemical and plastic world. I would like to present you today mainly our report, Bio-based Building Blocks and Polymers. We're doing every year an update on this report since many years, and we're selling this report to a lot of big brands and big companies worldwide. It's very detailed. It's 338 pages, 17 building blocks, 174 company profiles, and so I will show you the basic content of this report. First, on the building blocks. These are commercial data we getting from companies worldwide. We have an international team in Asia, in North America, and in Europe, and we're collecting directly from the companies this data here. And if you look to the bio-based building blocks, I will not all list them. There are a lot you see here, a lot which you know very well, I think. And some was big hopes in the past, some failed, some are successful today. And the most impressive is here that the compounded annual growth rate is 11% between 2020 and 25. This is much more than the petrochemical sector. which have growth rates between 3 and 4%. So we see that the organic building blocks really getting additional shares on the market. And if we have a little deeper dive in it, we see here some examples. We see in Asia expansion of epichlorohydrin. It's often produced from glycerol, from a byproduct for the biodiesel production. We see increasing lactic acid, PDO, and also succinic acid capacities in the different regions. And the main drivers for this increase to 2025 are furan derivatives. I will show on the next slide too, MPG and succinic acid. If you compare it to some forecasts 10 years ago, it's really a little bit different what's happening on the market, but it's also not easy to make forecasts for new building blocks, of course. And here you see, for example, these furan-based products like CMF, FDCA, and HMF, which all have a wide range of different applications in the polymer sector, but also in solvents, for example. They're all based on fructose. Fructose is a food product, so it could have some issues in discussions, but fructose is a very interesting intermediate or raw material for this kind of new molecules. Yeah, this was very short on the building blocks. Mainly I talk on polymers now. And here you see the worldwide polymer production. It's interesting that we have not only the structural polymers. Normally you see only structural polymers, but if we have also functional polymers here, we have rubber, man-made fibers, and you see always with the green part, the share of bio-based polymers in the total picture. And if you look to all kinds of polymers, excluding cellulose, cellulose is not included here, then you see the total bio-based share is already 8%, but it's mainly coming from the high share in rubber and functional polymers. Here you have paper starch. So if people discuss should we use starch for bio-based polymers, much more starch is going in the paper industry to make paper working. So the additional starch for biopolymers is very small compared to the paper starch. Just as an example that often in discussion this is forgotten. We're looking mainly as user now to the structural polymers. Here the bio-based share is about 1% today, and we make a deeper dive in this sector. This is mainly discussed. If you look to the world plastic production, you'll see the green part is the bio-based part, is about this 1% today. So it's not easy to see in this graph here, it's still a small share. But you also see here that the growth of the plastic industry worldwide is, except some economic crisis in 2008, is still growing fast. So all the discussion on plastic and packaging, the impact so far on world level is not visible. We have still here growth rate 3-4% per year. When we look into bio-based polymers, we can make a difference between 3 different groups. These are the drop-ins first. This is PE, PET, polypropylene. These are polymers which are identical to the petrochemical ones, and they are substituted in the process at a very early stage. For example, you make bioethanol. From bioethanol, you can make polyethylene or also PET. This is done in big scale today. If you look on smart drop-ins, they also are identically with the petrochemical counterparts. But the difference here is that the pathway is completely different. So if you look, for example, to epoxy resins, they're made from glycerol. There's a complete different pathway than the normal petrochemical pathway. So they are at the end the same, but the pathway is completely different. And then you have the new polymers, dedicated ones, cellulose acetate, PEF, PHAs, PLAs, and so on, which have no direct counterpart in the petrochemical world. And maybe when we look to the total production, I will more small slides, we have the production capacity of 4.6 million tons worldwide. The different shares, we can see the next slide better. And I show also here the slide from European Bioplastic Association. They are using the same data as we do. So our data are also used by European Bioplastics, but they have much smaller data. You see this 2.1, not 4.6. And the reason is that they're excluding some bio-based polymers. Don't ask me why, but they have just a selection from our data. And for example, they're not taking into account cellulose acetate, epoxy resins, EPDM, and so on. And that's the reason they have smaller, lower data, but at the end, it's the same database. If you want to look to all 17 commercially available bio-based polymers, just take our data. And here we see again the full spectrum of 17 commercially available bio-based polymers on the market. And here we have a growth rate from 8%, so that's a little bit lower than the building blocks. The reason is building blocks you can do a lot different things with, also food sector and detergents, not only polymers. And but still, 8% is much higher than the 3 to 4 in the petrochemical area. So also the bio-based polymer getting additional shares, and it will come the next years to 2, 3, 5, and 10% share just from the further development. And we have also just collected new data for 21. It's not published so far. And here we see already a growth rate for the next 5 years of 15%, because there are a lot of additional investment in Asia, Europe, and North America. So this is a very stimulating situation. It was very different in the years before. You see 2008 to 20, the growth rate was very slow, but now they're getting really speed from the market demand. And here I mentioned some expansion like Asian PLA production, PHA worldwide, we see new investments. We see also additional polyethylene, polypropylene production, for example, from bio-based naphtha made from just cooking oil. So there are a lot of different pathways here. There are just a few mentioned here. And so we see in many different areas, investment, polyamides, PBIT, polyethylene, PHA, PLA, and also polypropylene. So we see the trend, there are different parallel trends. So we have on one hand side, investment in dedicated specific bio-based polymers. On the other hand, we see also investment in the standard polymers with just another feedstock like bio-naphtha. Yeah, I will not go in all the details here, but the message is the only bio-based polymer which is not increasing is PET. And the reason for this is that Coca-Cola, who was the main driver of the demand for PET, decided a few years ago to stop the activities. And so this is the only polymer market that's really shrinking. In our report, we have a very detailed information. We have here the example of PLA. So you see all PLA producers worldwide. These are a lot. Also in China, you have a lot of PLA producers. They are all listed here with their capacities and how they grow. And so for each polymer, you find, if you need that, all information are here. And also of the company profiles, describing the history and development of the company, their different facilities, price levels, and so on. So just as an example, what detailed information are there. If you look to the global production capacity in 2020, Asia is the leading region, followed by Europe, North America, and South America. Australia is here with 1%, so there is some production, but compared to the other regions, relatively small today. And if you look at the markets, it's impressive that today you can use bio-based polymers in almost all applications. Yeah, here you see fiber, packaging, automotive, construction, consumer goods, agriculture, electrics, functional. So if you have a specific application, the chance to find a bio-based solution is extremely high today. Often the discussion is also about the competition on biomass supply. And here on the left-hand side to see how the world biomass production is 12.5 billion tons is used today, 59% for feed, 16 bioenergy, 12 food, 11 all kind material uses, also wood construction. And finally, the bio-based polymers have a share of 0.038%, which is related to an area of 0.006%. So the area is even smaller because you're using very efficient crops and byproducts. This other slide is showing here that a big share is coming from glycerol for epoxy production. So you have already, the food crops are still 40%, but you have already other streams used for biopolymer production. And also, this is another topic, it's not a real problem to use food crops, it's not a problem at all. This is more academic discussion on this point. You can discuss later if you're interested. Yeah, and finally, I want to show you the Renewable Carbon Initiative. These companies, and we're getting every month additional 3-4 companies, the biggest in the world, joining us, working together to replace fossil carbon in their production by biomass, by CO2 utilization, and by recycling. Today I talked only on biopolymers, but I could also talk on CO2-based polymers or recycling here. And these companies take this very seriously. Take Unilever here, for example. They have pronounced that after 2035, they will not accept any fossil carbon in their detergent products. And this is high pressure on the value chain, also supply chain. But they will find companies producing all the nice materials without any fossil carbon. And we're also supported by partners like WWF, for example, Textile Exchange and others, perhaps not so well known in Australia, but this is a great activity. And the last slide is here, the vision of 2050. You'll see the situation 2018, and the vision is in 2050 that we can replace all fossil carbon in the supply chain. And we will only have recycling. That means taking carbon from the technosphere, where the products are bio-based and CO2-based. And if you would ask me why bio-based is the smallest share, the reason is biodiversity. It's not easy to see here from 4 to 135 is a big expansion, but the areas are limited. Biodiversity loss is a very serious issue. And it's not possible to replace the demand here completely by biomass. This will be not possible. So we need other carbon sources, and biomass, bioeconomy is not alone. We have CO2 and recycling in addition. And so I think this could be a very nice scenario for the future. Thank you for your attention. And because I'm live here, if you have any questions, I'm here to discuss with you. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Michael. We're running a bit behind, so we'll let you go to bed, but questions will be assembled and maybe sent to you in a few hours or tomorrow when you wake up over breakfast. So our next speaker, thank you very much, is Ian O'Hara. Professor Ian O'Hara, he's the Deputy Director of the QUT Centre for Agriculture and the Bioeconomy. He's in real life. You can harass him at morning tea.
Oh, thanks, Hugh. How's everyone going? Okay, got some thumbs up. We're good. We're good. Well, it is really nice to be here in person, I've got to say. And for many of us, it's been quite a long time since we've had a chance to get together. I remember, I was just saying before to Madonna, it was great to be here for the Commonwealth Innovation Forum, 2018, I think. And I think the last time we had a Bioeconomy Forum was the LSQ Bioeconomy Forum in about October 2019. That seems like quite a long time ago. But it is great to be here. I think it's really important for us to get together as a community. And I think over the past sort of 12 months, while it's been difficult, we're the lesser for not having had the opportunity to get together and meet in these sort of forums. And I think it would also be useful for me just to acknowledge the people in other states and recognise the people in other states. We're very fortunate to be here today. There's a lot of people doing it really tough in lockdown. So just a shout out to our friends and colleagues in other states. And also, we look forward to the day when we might be able to gather together as a national group and international body in bioeconomy. So today I'll probably take a step back, and we've had a couple of really great presentations from Michael and Manfred there and from Jim earlier on, and of course everyone else. But this opportunity to learn from leading global experts is really fabulous. But I'm going to take a step back and maybe talk a bit more about the why, and talk a bit more about how we see things in Queensland, but looking at the global perspective from Queensland. And in the interest of recycling, I'm recycling a slide that I've used at probably most of my talks over the past few years. But I think it's important to just get back to why we're all here. So as a globe, we face pretty big challenges. We need to produce, by 2050, we need to produce 70% more food than we do now to meet the demands of a growing population. We need to produce 50% more energy. So think about that. What are we now? 2020, 2021. 30 years, we need 70% more food, 50% more energy. And we have to do that while we completely decarbonise the economy. Big challenge. As if that wasn't big enough, we just can't expand on more land, we can't use more fertiliser, we can't just go and consume more water, because we've got this challenge with resources. We've already got major issues with loss of biodiversity, loss of natural capital. So when we talk about bioeconomy, we talk about the competing interests of the need to do things for our economy with the need to maintain and protect the sustainability of our environment. And I think in terms of one of the changes that's happened in bioeconomy over the past decade or two, it's this realisation that economy and sustainability must go hand in hand for our future economy. We've all heard a lot about the IPCC report over the past few years, but again, I just want to flash it up there just because this is really important. And so there's a number of facts here that have come straight out of the report. Our carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere now are higher than they've been for the past 2 million years, at any stage in the past 2 million years. Each of the last 4 decades was warmer than one preceding it. Global surface temperatures are 1.1 degrees higher than they were a century ago, much higher over land. Sea level has already risen on average by 200 millimetres, and that rate's increasing, etc., etc. We can go on. This is an important and urgent issue. And the other point I just want to highlight today is that overwhelmingly our use of materials continues to be linear. And Ashleigh and Jaine referenced this also earlier. Over 90% of the materials that we use in society are extracted, consumed and disposed of in a non-productive way. But you look at only 9 billion tonnes of material is recycled, 92 billion tonnes is extracted, used and discarded. But we've also got this increasing demand. So by 2060, we could need as much as 167 billion tonnes of material. So not only are we not recycling enough, not only are we extracting, we're going to have to extract more to meet the demands of our future requirements. And as Michael just said in the previous talk, only around about a third of the material of the carbon we use is bio-based, 2/3 is fossil-based. So in this context, what is the bioeconomy? We've been shown a few different definitions this morning, so I won't dwell on this too much. But what you will notice in each of these definitions is this need to link economy and sustainability in a very strong way. And so the one I'll focus on here is the bottom one, which is the definition developed by the Global Bioeconomy Summit in 2018, which is the bioeconomy is a production, utilisation and conservation of biological resources to provide information, products, processes and services in all economic sectors towards a sustainable economy. And again, I want to focus on that all economic sectors. Bioeconomy is not just about food or about polymers or about chemicals. There are opportunities for bioeconomy right through all of the sectors of the economy. And here's a graphic modified from the Biofutures Roadmap in 2015, where we can see some of the parts of the bioeconomy and how they fit together. And so we can look at the resources of the bioeconomy. We can look at the forestry or the natural resources in our marine bioeconomy. We can look at some of the things that we grow in the way of agriculture and food crops or bioenergy crops. And then we can look at the way that we take those and process them for sectors across the economy, for food production, for fuels production, for bio-based polymers or chemicals, as we've heard about, for energy, but also for the output of those supporting all sectors of the economy through construction and retail and other sectors as well. So bioeconomy is very much integrated right through the economy. And the other key factor there is that we need to base the developments of this bioeconomy on science, innovation and knowledge. And that's a really critical point. This is, and we'll get to that in a minute, it's not just about resource substitution. This is about a new way of doing things that we need to do. And so bioeconomy contributes to the Sustainable Development Goals. And so a study that was done several years ago looked at how bioeconomy mapped across those goals. And in fact, the majority of the Sustainable Development Goals relied upon bioeconomy in some way to meet their needs, whether it be better, higher knowledge-intensive jobs in regional areas, whether it be supporting food production, reducing waste, supporting regeneration of land. In all sectors of those, or across right through the Sustainable Development Goals, bioeconomy is really important. And people have referenced the fact that bioeconomy policy is increasing, and this study was updated last year, which looked at the number of bioeconomy or bioeconomy-related policies around the world. The key bioeconomy-related policy in Australia is actually the Biofutures policy in Queensland. Unfortunately, we don't have a really cohesive national policy around bioeconomy. But you can see that the companies are moving very strongly to make sure that their policy systems, their frameworks, are ready and supportive of this change that's coming through. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the changing view of bioeconomy. If we'd been in a forum like this about 10 years ago, we would have talked a lot about the resource substitution view of bioeconomy. We would have said that, look, there's too much fossil fuels being used in fuels or chemicals or plastics. All we have to do is to replace fossil fuel with a bio-based material, and away we go. We've solved the problem. What we've discovered over time is that is a long way from being it's quite insufficient to do that. When we look at the fact that we waste 90% of our carbon at the moment through this linear cycle, we can't just be replacing a fossil-based disposal system with a bio-based system, then disposing of it. The resource constraints, the planetary boundaries don't allow us to do that. So we have to think fundamentally very different about the way we think about bioeconomy and about the way we substitute bio-based resources for fossil-based resources. And so we need to start thinking about a different economic system. We need to make sure that we're incorporating other aspects of policy and other aspects of the economy into our discussion around bioeconomy. So circular economy is very important. The way we deal with waste, resource recovery is very important. The way we talk about energy, all of these things link together. And so we now think about the bioeconomy as being, from the perspective of a biotechnology innovation system. So this acknowledges the fact that it's actually a lot more complex than just substitution of one non-sustainable resource for a renewable but potentially non-sustainable resource if we don't do it in the right way. And so across the different sectors of the economy, food and agriculture, the development of bioresources, energy manufacturing, health, bio-based products, and environmental services, bioeconomy will play and contributes to aspects right across there. But underpinning all of that and right at the very centre of all of that is this need to commit to a solid science, knowledge and innovation approach to the way that we plan our systems and to the way that we think about how we achieve this. Okay, I'm hurrying. So just a couple of, I'll rush through till the end. So the EU did a study to look at the value of the bioeconomy to the European Union, and the study sort of showed around about 18 million people employed, 614 billion euros of gross value, and around 5% of their economy was bioeconomy. In the United States, through their Bio-Preferred program, they currently have 40,000 bio-based products that's supplied to the market, $157 billion in direct value add, and around about 5 million people employed in the US bio-based products industry. So bio-based products creates jobs, it creates economic growth. There are lots of really good reasons for us to also think about that. I do want to acknowledge that COVID has had some interesting impacts on bioeconomy. And of course, we know the numbers around how many people have been infected and died, etc. But the economic impact has been really strong. We've seen some interesting developments, like the increased use of plastics through disposable PPE, gloves, etc. And we've also highlighted weaknesses in global supply chains. But very importantly, biotechnology has contributed to the solution as well. So through not only vaccines, but diagnostics and therapeutics and other methods, we've been able to rapidly scale up our understanding. Through the science innovation, we've been able to adapt really quickly to some of the challenges. And I really like that sort of quote there from Charles Z. Malik. Had this crisis hit a less well-capitalised and less mature biotech sector 15 years ago, it would have been catastrophic, both for the biotechnology sector, but also for our ability to deliver change in the nature of a pandemic like this. So just to wrap up, the next panel session will talk a lot more about Queensland's bioeconomy potential, but there's really good reasons why Queensland has identified this as an opportunity, and we'll keep pushing towards that. A couple of quick challenges, a couple of slides left. Challenges in growing the bioeconomy. Look, I think one of our key challenges is really taking bioeconomy policy nationally. Queensland has a market of a certain size, but really to get scale, momentum and growth, we need to make sure that this conversation is happening nationally. We do have a small domestic market. We do need to look to international markets. There's a bit of a lack of public discourse, and so hopefully today and beyond we can start to engage more with the general public and civil society around understanding of bioeconomy. There is global competition for investment, so what's the business proposition for Queensland? And then COVID. Is it going to be a brake on the bioeconomy? Is it going to slow us down and stop us doing things? Or is it actually going to be an accelerator? And I think to some extent the choice is ours. So in terms of capturing those opportunities, we do need to position Queensland as a regional leader. We need a suite of aligned policies, and so we talk about, again, circular economy and waste resource management, and energy policy and climate policy. All of these things need to come together to make the change that we need in society. We need to partner. We need strong regional networks and clusters, and it'll be great to hear some of those stories from people later on. And we need to continue to invest in innovation and science, because that's really important to make sure that we're doing this in the right way. So I'll leave it there. The bioeconomy is founded on these three principles: that there is an economic opportunity for us, there's an environmental urgency that we need to address, but we also need to make sure that the new economies that we develop result in real societal benefit, and that we keep all three of those at the heart of our conversations. So thank you very much, and apologies if I've rattled on a bit too long. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. And so hopefully we can get all the slides at some point or other afterwards from the speakers. Thanks. Our second to last speaker, and I've triaged the discussion session, so we've just got two more speakers. Sorry, Ian, it's easy to intimidate a real person. It's very hard to intimidate a pre-recorded video, so I can try. But our next speaker is on Zoom, and that's Matt Gardner. We're very lucky to have him joining us from California. He's the Chief Executive of the California Biomanufacturing Centre. Thanks for joining us. Probably about 5 p.m. there, so you've got 10 minutes. Thanks.
That's right. Thanks, Hugh. Appreciate that. And always a pleasure to follow Ian. I just want to tip my cap, first of all, to LSQ. It was about 15 years ago. In fact, 15 years ago that I was part of a group that produced with the OECD and Peter Riddle's a bioeconomy summit here in Silicon Valley in 2006. So 15 years ago, the topics were quite a bit different. I'm going to share my slides just for a moment. Just have a few slides that I'm going to blaze through very quickly. And I think appreciate following Ian, because I deeply appreciate the context, and as some of the others have said as well, the field is well set around the world. And so part of what I want to point to here in just a couple of minutes is that we're about to really enter a production age, or we may be about to enter a production age, and if things go as planned and hoped, Australia has an opportunity, and Queensland is the perfect place for this to occur, to be really part of that scale up and part of the worldwide production engine for this next bioeconomy. And I'll talk a little bit about what processes are occurring now and what they might suggest for what this looks like and what's next. I'll share with you the results of some industry sounding that we've done over the last couple of years and what it suggests for why the fit is so clean and in essence, why this looks so familiar for economies that are accustomed to primary industries and how they move. So like I say, the fit is very clean. The California Biomanufacturing Center is a brand new organization, manufacturing center of excellence in Northern California, with a range of large stakeholders in biomanufacturing and centered around a number of academic partners that include UC Davis, UC Berkeley, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, Solano College in the area, which is the equivalent of a TAFE, offers a biomanufacturing degree program, and others as well. About 500 acres of biomanufacturing in that precinct, and continuing to expand. Most of it is in the sort of space that we've conventionally talked about in bioprocessing, which is the sort of the cell culture environment. This is a picture of one of the rooms at Genentech in their cell culture facility there in our backyard. This is, I think, what is commonly thought of as the sort of the production environment. I know we've already talked a lot about this today, so I don't want to belabor the point. I do think we'll reach a maturation in the industry that will tell us that we never should have thrown anything away, that we, if we value the entire life cycle of not just a product, but its ingredients, that we'll get to a different understanding of what production means for us. We're not yet at deep enough understanding to sort of harness all of the potential of recovery and separations. And so I would say that we're sort of at the beginning of a lot of these things, and very little is done on optimization of third and fourth generation platforms. And so there's a tremendous amount of road still ahead on making these processes better and more efficient. For example, today, if you're doing cogeneration with municipal solid waste, it's terribly inefficient. It's not worth even exploring doing the recovery and separations of some of the mineral value that might be in that water. So we're a long way from fully understanding how to make those things achievable, as an example. What's this going to look like? I think, I just want to start from sort of, the baseline of production environments around the world in biotechnology has been very expensive sort of clean room HEPA filtration environments. We certainly need those. Those kinds of production environments are fantastic. But what's about to explode is the amount of investment in things that have looked more like traditional refineries. And we get that very clear indication from industry leaders that the amount of investment is at a takeoff point, and just at the very beginning of that. Interestingly, on the bottom left picture, Total is the first conventional petrochemical company to convert an entire traditional oil refinery to bio-based production. So very interesting transformation happening there. And I think the nature of this sort of scan of the environment is also that this is happening right now all over the world. So this is an ideal time to be having this conversation. And as you can plainly see, this looks exactly like primary industries as you know them now at home. So this is not going to be foreign material. But why is it exciting and why is it expiring? There are many applications that I think are doing things that are irreplaceable. And so I think, essentially, if you look at the squalene example from Amyris, the fact that they're not harvesting shark organs to make squalene byproducts is obviously unsubstitutable. And so really a fantastic example, the same way that DuPont has been making bioisoprene as an example of getting away from a precious natural resource. So we'll have more of these, and I think we'll continue to see them. There are still sort of generational inspirational stories coming out of the science here as well, and you'd all appreciate the plastic blob in the ocean. That enzyme hasn't really been sort of solved yet, and the ability to take the plastic-eating enzyme and deploy it in whatever that best modality might be is a current question. And so examples like this are why we need to get to scale in a hurry. Here's an enzyme, it's doing great stuff. how is it going to be best put to work. The way the oil-eating enzyme has worked for a few decades now, it can be applied to an oil spill, and it just dies in the water and degrades naturally. So those things are still to be solved with the plastic-eating enzyme, but similar excitement about how this might work. So obviously tremendous solutions to first-level global problems now, and yet more to come. So we did a sort of a market sounding exercise, a large team of folks asking industry how it perceived the production environment and capacity overall. And what we found was, and you may have heard this, so forgive me if it's not new for you, but there's a tremendous amount of pent up demand. In other words, there's no global production capacity right now today. So basically all formats of bioprocess industry segments are highly acutely needed. There's a bit of a production environment crisis in the industry at the moment. And so we expect to see billions of dollars of new investment in this category in the next decade. And interestingly, when specifically asked about sort of the division of the world in three pieces, the Americas, EMEA, and Asia Pac, Australia is considered very favorably, and the feedstock awareness that people have of Queensland is tremendous as well. So we got this feedback so routinely that it became sort of a sense, even in large European traditional chemical companies, that the assumptions are there about the safety of intellectual property in the pro-business environment, the sugar as a feedstock for raw material. So I think the upshot of the reputation is that it's there for Queensland and Australia to grab, and the investment will come. It's on its way already. And so I think we're just at an outstanding takeoff point to grab I would say, disproportionate share of what ends up being the market in this space. And I think, as you've heard from a few of the speakers already, the policy levers that you apply will be very important. And so as examples of that, I think your infrastructure, generally geared to primary industries, is extremely helpful and comforting to those large commodities type companies. There'll be a few more questions that come up during that process. And I think your experience with primary industries will be, again, sort of a sense of security for those companies dealing at that kind of global scale. So I think you're extremely well positioned to do incredibly well in this next 10 years as this industry invests billions of dollars in production. So I'll pause there. Hugh.
Great, thank you very much, Matt. Thank you for being very concise and being very positive and optimistic. That's very exciting. I have triaged the panel, and the panel was a manel, and I'm not allowed to be on them, so I have to triage it anyway. So I'm glad we have no time for it. You know what a manel is? It's an all-male panel, and I've signed the pledge. So our last speaker, in fact, is Ann-Kathrin Kaufmann. She is pre-recorded. I'm not going to come back. I'm going to ask Madonna to wrap up the session to save a bit of time, and she will head you off to some caffeine. So thank you very much.
Hi everybody, my name is Ann-Kathrin Kaufmann. I'm sitting here in Straubing at the moment. I'm very happy that I get the chance to be a part of your conference today, and I am pre-recording this and therefore I'm very thankful for this opportunity, and I will share my slides with you now without further ado, and I hope that it will work out. A second. As I said, I'm speaking to you today from the city of Straubing, which is a city in Lower Bavaria with approximately 45,000 inhabitants. In total, our area has approximately 150,000 inhabitants. And I work for the BioCampus Straubing GmbH. And you will see right now that we have a couple of very interesting characteristics in our region that we try to utilize and harness to enhance our region as a bioeconomy hub and ecosystem for the bio-based economy here on a regional level. Two of the characteristics or facilities that we have that we would like to harness or that we are harnessing, the port, our Danube port that we operate, which gives a very good benefit in terms of logistics, also for biomass, and then our technology and incubation, startup incubation center that you can see here, and the adjacent physical biocampus, an area of approximately 8 hectares. And I'm going to show you today what we are trying and planning to do on this area in terms of infrastructure and also in terms of services, and how we are embedding it in our regional ecosystem that we have here in Straubing, which is very unique for Bavaria, and that is really a region that is also pushed and supported by the Bavarian government and the political environment around it. As I already told you, we are a public entity. I work for the BioCampus Straubing GmbH, which is an agency that is held by our Zweckverband, that again is held or in the hands of the shareholders that are the city of Straubing and the administrative district of Straubing. So we are entirely publicly held, publicly run, and serve the interests of these entities. And our main purpose at the BioCampus Straubing GmbH is to develop this region to be a very active actor and a very active and prospering region for the bio-based economy. Here you can see our port area from above, from air view. This is our basin, port basin. This is the river Danube. Our entire area has a total of 220 hectares. We have approximately 80 enterprises operating here. Not all of them obviously are bio-based companies, but especially in the port basin area, we have a lot of agricultural companies, trading companies, also manufacturing companies. We have feed plants. We have the ADM, rapeseed and oilseed mill here, one of the biggest, the key account for our port, that is handling or converting 700,000 tons of oilseeds per year. And we also have another fuel player here in the port, which is Clavian. I'm going to tell you a bit more about that in a second. And in total, we have approximately 4 million tons of cargo handling tri-modally in the port per year, which is a very important factor for us, is our proximity to our excellence university, the Technical University of Munich, with their campus here in Straubing for biotechnology and sustainability. I'm going to show you in a second that this is a very important asset for us, especially when we're talking about our bioeconomy and sustainability focus that we are working on. And as you can see, we are embedded in, or the region is characterized by agriculture and forestry. So traditionally, this is a very strong area in terms of agriculture and forestry, which also gives us good opportunities regarding feedstock availability. Also, we have the logistics access over the Danube here, and with all of this comes also access to, which we want to emphasize, second generation biomass feedstock. Here you can see our business units, and which is not very typical or uncommon for a port, are the two letter ones. So we have a technology and startup incubation center infrastructure for young companies, and we are, as I am the personification of that, in the bio-based economy. When I talk about we are not doing this alone. I work for the BioCampus. We are located and belong to the port of Straubing, but we have a lot of older and even more important actors in Straubing, which makes this such an interesting cluster for our entire region. We have Bavarian-wide actors like Kaufmann and the Technology and Support Center that are working under the roof of the Competence Center for Renewable Raw Materials here in Straubing. And the third pillar of this is the TUM Campus for Biotechnology and Sustainability, which is growing by the minute in terms of professorships, in terms of students, in terms of infrastructure buildings. And we are very proud to have this strong player here in the region that shapes our profile towards bioeconomy and sustainability in industrial biotech. Also important is our Fraunhofer entity here, the Fraunhofer BioCat, that is also growing. And we have some more interesting players like Biological Technological Assistance School, and also the Navareum, which is an experience room, will be opening soon for the broader public to also give insights into the bio-based economy and renewable energy world to the broader society. As I said, for us, it's very important to work in an innovation chain. And here you can see again the elements of the system that we are trying to establish here in this region of renewable raw materials. Is the brand that we have been running for quite some time now. We've been thinking about reframing it, but it will stay for now as it is very ingrained already in the region. And you can see here that, of course, we start with the research and the applied sciences with the actors. And then what we want to do here in the port is we want to facilitate the transfer into innovation by networks, by different kinds of formats that we offer, open innovation formats. We are working in the startup ecosystem, so we are very much focusing on startup and younger companies. This is because we don't have a lot of space in terms of settling big biorefineries, for example. This is a learning that we have, focusing on the smaller, more dynamic developments. And we're also offering infrastructure and scale-up infrastructure that I'm going to show you in a second. And then again, in the end, we want to transfer this into the market, into the economy on different scales and levels. Here you can see the same story in a different setup with some more actors involved here. So what I wanted to show you is that for us, it's very important to have this entire chain in the ecosystem, from research to education, over the business idea development, incubation, supporting young companies, especially in the bio-based economy. They have different needs than like an IT startup, for example. They need more infrastructure, more lab space, for example. Something that we are learning right now is so important. And we're also investing in this. So we need more infrastructure in terms of labs to offer to those biotech startups. In a softer way, we are offering support in our business and startup competition, Plan B, bio-based business Bavaria. And we offer lab space, office space in our technology and startup incubation center that will be expanded as I said, we are running out of space there right now. We have Fraunhofer, we have demonstration examples like the Clariant liquid plant that we have here in the port of Straubing, the LXP group, that is also a biomass conversion technology with the products of high value lignin and different fractions of carbohydrates. And then I'm going to show you our big investment that we are currently working towards, and that I think is very important as a learning. We need infrastructure to go through this valley of death, especially industrial biotechnology is seeing that a lot. From lab to market, it's a very, very long road, and we are trying to bridge this road with this BioCampus multi-pilot infrastructure. And also with our startup promotion that we do in terms of Plan B, we have been supporting over 180 startups and business ideas since 2014, and we will continue to do so next year. We just awarded the prizes to our to this year's top 3 very exciting ideas, and we have already settled 4 startups since the beginning in 2014 here in Straubing, which to us is a very, very high success rate. As I said, infrastructure is key for us. That's why I'm going to show you our next step or next stop. It's both. So if we consider this as a journey, the next stop to market is our BioCampus development. Here you can see the infrastructure that we already have. This is our technology and startup incubation center fully booked at the moment, part labs, mostly office space, some workshops. And this is the Clarion sunliquid plant, where they are demonstrating their sunliquid process for lignocellulosic bioethanol. This is where we want to go. Currently in planning is the expansion of our technology and startup center here, with especially focus on lab space, also shared lab space. And this is the BioCampus multi-pilot. It's an open access multi-purpose demonstration plan for industrial biotechnology processes. I'm going to tell you some more parts about that. And then we want to go further. In the second and third step, we are looking for a further expansion of this building complex. And we want to settle the Fraunhofer that is currently located in the city center of Straubing when it's growing here in the port. And we will also want to attract investors for site infrastructure like parking or hotels. And then we, of course, want to offer, as I said, smaller scale investments here from the private sector, similar piloting demonstration activities that have a suitable option here in this area where we do not have a lot of sites and land plots available open, and where we do not have central utility provisions like steam, etc. But so that are the shortcomings that we have to work with. But this is our strategy to adapt to that. Just a quick info about the BioCampus multi-pilot that we are planning. It is going to be a process demonstration facility on a multi-purpose level, so not just one process, but a range, a set of processes. It will be serving for scale-up and product sample production, very high in the TRL, so TRL 5, 6, 7, 8, and maybe also beyond. It will be open access for startups, for SMEs, for industry, and also for academia on a global scale. We are receiving 40 million euro funding for the construction of this infrastructure from the Bavarian Ministry for Economics. That is also the sponsor of the Bavarian Bioeconomy Strategy. So this is part of the Bavarian Bioeconomy Strategy, and we are very proud to be the facilitator of this element of the strategy, and Straubing plays a very important role in this strategy. So saying that, I think the political support is something that is very, very important for the development of these bioeconomy hubs. And we, as the future operators of this plan, currently we are preparing the construction phase, and we hope that it will be up and running in 2024. The operator will be a public operator, so there will be no IP claims. We will offer service according to industry standards, and there will be a broad network for scientific and technical support. This is a brief first picture of how the pilot plant will look like. So you see the different modules here: pre-treatment, reaction, downstream, the utilities, and then also some side units. And the focus at first will be on lignocellulosic feedstock. We are aware that there's a lot of other trends currently. We are trying to cover this by having a strategy to enlarge and to extend this facility in the future, but that will be the starting setup you can see here. So the take-homes from my perspective are that you have to know what you can do and what you cannot do, like in the terms of the small scale versus the large scale. So we will never facilitate a 10-hectare biorefinery in Straubing, but we will be able to host a lot of piloting demonstration activities. It's always important to know your site advantages, the existing infrastructure, the feedstock that you can use, and utilize this. If there is political support, harness it, do it in a triple helix manner, so involve all the very important stakeholders to get also novel infrastructure. And then, as I said, triple helix requires a network. Our regional network is very strong. We also know our surrounding network and actors. It's very important, in my opinion, not to double things, but to use synergies. And then our next step would be really to expand across the regional borders, across the German borders, which I think is a good opportunity with you guys in Australia. And that being said, I'd be happy if you get in touch. Since I'm not present for discussion and questions, please do not hesitate to send them over to me. And I will also provide these slides, and I look forward to hearing from you guys, and thank you very much.
And a big thank you to Ann-Kathrin there. Can I actually thank all our speakers this morning and our wonderful moderator, Professor Possingham, and actually ask our speakers to come up on stage so that we can thank you and take a photograph. If you'd like to do that now, please. And we have a whole lot more to inform and challenge you coming up after morning tea. You know, Professor O'Hara reminded us of that figure that 2 years ago, carbon dioxide levels were higher than at any time in the last 2 million years. And it just provides one challenge in one area where the bioeconomy can be focused without referring to food and security or energy or a host of other areas. And I think this morning we've looked at definitions of bioeconomy. We've seen the enormous challenges it may be directed at, but we've also had a hint of the opportunities that it offers, and we're going to explore that more after morning tea. So let's grab a cuppa now. We need to be back in about 15 minutes or so if you can grab that muffin and some caffeine and take your seat again so that we can get on with the next part of our day. Thank you, and could our speakers from this morning please make their way to the stage.